Alrighty, so hi guys, I'm Cassandra Emilianchik, and I'm the project lead for Peblito Rock and Roll. No longer Capstone, we have our actual title now, so that's great. But so just a little recap of our game. Peblito Rock and Roll is a 3D platformer that is supposed to be a whimsical, humorous, and playful game. We have a theme for breaking the mold, and you get to play as Peblito, a little rock character, on a journey to find the fabled mystical tree and this magical fruit. And along the way, you get to explore forgotten paths and forge some new ones. So for March, we had the monthly motto of keep the momentum, and momentum stood for my oh my, extraordinary new things you're making. Um, but overall, the vibe for the month was putting an emphasis on gameplay, and that meant polishing our mechanics, developing lots of action blocks, and hosting our first focus group test. Some other goals that we had this month were to begin new asset development, which included concepting custom assets and concepting our new character. And also, as we are now in production and out of pre-production, we switched from spiral development to critical path. So these are our March commitments that we established at the last status update. And the things that are underlined are things that we actually adjusted before we even got started with the month. So instead of doing 10 animations, we reduced that to 5 so that we could save some of our animation hours for our new character that we're developing. And we also reduced the amount of assets that we're making to 10 new assets so that we could spend more time pushing our existing props to the next level. And we also decided to change making a custom skybox to developing custom assets for the interior of our tree, since all of our levels do take place inside, and therefore we won't need a skybox. And then also in terms of design, instead of doing levels the normal way, we've decided to take a modular development approach where we break our levels into chunks and we do mini spiral development for those chunks. So as such, we've changed it to planning our 2 levels, having one module white boxed, and do some edits on the vertical slice island in terms, excuse me, of gameplay. So everything that's in the normal text color is stuff that we accomplished. Stuff in the brownish red is stuff that we didn't necessarily deliver on or didn't meet our expectations. And the green items we absolutely crushed and over delivered on. So for the things that either were delayed or got cut, we're moving lighting to our design team instead of having the art team do it, and we will be revisiting that in the coming months. We also cut 2 of our mini mechanics due to scope and wanted to focus on polishing our other 4 mini mechanics. And then in programming, we did end up prototyping our baseball slide, but we put that on hold along with the superheated areas until we're sure that we're going to use this in the game. In terms of things that we absolutely crushed, we totally knocked it out of the park with sculpting and texturing our rocks from the asset packs, and we have over 100, almost 200 of those, and we are almost done with that entire process. We also crushed it in terms of our special effects creation. We have over 10 new ones. And in design, we obliterated our goal of creating 18 action blocks with a total of 75 action blocks having been created in the past month. And with our metrics tool, we ended up adding a lot more functionality to the metrics tool gathering process than we initially planned for. So to get right into things, I'll start off with some animations that we made for Peblito. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we have a death animation. And then moving to the right, we have a dash. And then next to that, we have an animation for variation of the dash, where he does a little flip while he's dashing. Next to that, we have the vine whip, where Peblito will whip his vine to a grapple point and then swing. And the 2 animations on the top are rotations of that swing animation. Last month, we did get some feedback about Peblito's walk animation. And on the left-hand side, you can see the old walk, where in engine, he does tend to skate a little bit while walking. We're continuing to explore various solutions to this, but some of the potential solutions that we're considering are just speeding up his walking animation so that he doesn't skate anymore, speeding up his feet and slowing down his arm swing so he doesn't look super janky while he's running, or this new walk concept, which we have here, where his feet come together in a little ball and roll while he is walking, and then he returns to biped form when he is stationary. In terms of our tree, we've been updating a lot with this. Pictured here is the update, and then it'll flash back to the old. But we've added the entrance to our tree, and that's where the players will go to enter the interior of the tree level. And we worked a lot on the texture scaling for our tree. One of the risks we identified last month was texture spooling within the entire vertical slice level. And something that helped us mitigate this risk is adding texture scaling to our tree. In terms of materials and effects, our artists have been very busy. So I'll take you from top right all the way around and then back to the center. We revisited our heat distortion effect, and then below that we have a little fire effect for when Peblito falls in the lava. Underneath that we have a camera shake animation for when things are happening in the cave, and next to that we added some detail to the dash. We added those little movement lines that you can see, and then his little lines all over his body actually glow blue when he is using his ability. And then next to that is a new mechanic, which I will explain about a little bit about later. That's called Burst. But similar to Dash, he does have some motion lines while he's charging up, and then also the tube effect when he is charged and ready to go. Above that, we have another lava splash, and then in the middle, we have a falling object effect, which you can also see utilized with falling objects in the upper right-hand corner. A little effect for Peblito kicking up dirt and rocks when he's rolling, and then a particle effect for when things are shaking and getting loose in the cave. This month, we also worked a lot on concepting our enemy character, and the three pictures on the left side of the screen are our initial idea for what we wanted this character to do. Similar to a Goomba, this character would be an obstacle for Peblito to dodge or kill, but as we were brainstorming, we wanted to change the functionality of this character, so it wasn't necessarily an enemy, but more of just an obstacle that Peblito might have to avoid. So now we have our snail character who secretes slime that if Peblito walks into it, it will slow down his movement for a period of time. So this way the player can either avoid the snail and its slime trail, or if they want to, they can destroy it by bursting through it. We've also been working on some custom assets. In the upper left-hand corner, we have a sculpt of our respawn point, which you guys saw last month. Beneath that, we have a fruit basket, which can be featured on some of our shrines throughout the game. And then in the center, we have some really interesting fruit, which can either serve as power-ups or objects of interest on the shrines. And then all the way on the right, we have concepts for various foliage that will be featured throughout our cave and tree, and then some early work on two types of mushrooms that were concepted. Like I mentioned with the asset pack rocks, we've been hard at work at making these stylistically consistent. So in each of these pictures, the before is on the left and the after is on the right. And our artists have been working really hard to get through almost 200 of these, and we are almost done with this, so we should be finishing this task up next month. In terms of updating the island for gameplay, we've added a bunch of stairs and set dressing so that the player is guided directly to the interior of the tree from where they pop out for the cave level that we are building. This is a little bit of a transition period between levels, so there's not a whole lot of gameplay, but we still wanted it to be visually appealing and interesting for the players as they're going up to the tree. For our two levels, we've been working really hard on concepting them and laying the framework for it. So the picture on the left is actually a concept of the interior of our tree and what we would like it to look like. Full of life with lots of foliage and a little bit of architecture to show that the rock people have been here before, even though it may have been some time. And then next to it is a concept of the temple scene that we would like to include in our cave tunnel sequence, which will then lead to the interior of the tree. And then here we can see a little statue that will also be similar to the ones that are already featured within our vertical slice level. Next to that, we have a layout of our cave tunnel level, and underneath that we have been doing some work with tree level scaling and building the framework for that level. So for mechanics and gameplay, since our game does place heavy emphasis on smooth movement, I'm going to have you guys go to this link. Julia should be posting it in the chat soon. And then that will take us through all of our mechanics and even a short gameplay demo. And then I will see you guys back here in about 11 minutes. Hello from YouTube, everyone. So to keep things rolling, I'm going to start talking about a bit of our mechanics and the things that we've been working on in the past few months. So with rolling, we've actually added collision with walls and other objects such as ramps. And so on the left side of the screen, you can actually see an early iteration of that. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see us actually implementing some ramps and the different shapes to see what we might want to use within our levels. Along with rolling, we've also added a death so that when Peblito runs into a permanent object like this pillar, he will actually shatter and die. In this video, we also have implemented our new checkpoint system, which reloads the whole map when you die so that our destructibles and collectibles are reset. But each time you reach a checkpoint, we save off the number of collectibles that you have when you reach that checkpoint so that we can restore the collectibles that you've already collected once you die and go back to that checkpoint. In terms of Vine Whip, last month you saw a lot of work on getting the swing right, and this month we've spent a lot of time making sure that the visuals feel good. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see us implementing an early version of our cable component to make the vine seem a bit more believable and have a bit of wobble to it instead of just a straight line that zaps right to the grapple point. And then on the right, we've actually added the parabolic curve to the whip to make its movement even more believable and have a bit more flow to the swing and the actual whip itself. So our new mechanic that we've introduced this month is Burst. It is similar to Dash in that you can use it to travel a short distance in a very quick amount of time. And so with this one, you actually have to press and hold the button to charge up the burst, and the more charge you have, the further distance you will go. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, you can actually destroy destructible objects with this. Here we have a crystal, but you could also use it to destroy rocks. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, this mechanic also does slow down time so that you can avoid quickly moving obstacles. Another prototype that we've been working on is a chase camera for our Indiana Jones style boulder chase scene. So here we actually have the boulder rolling the same way that we roll Peblito. So we're not actually simulating rolling here, but we are rotating the mesh in accordance with its movement to give the appearance of rolling. And one of the prototypes that we set out to make but have put on hold is our baseball slide. So Peblito would use this to fit under any objects that he normally wouldn't be able to fit under and maybe get to some hidden areas within our game. We have put this on hold just so that we're not wasting time developing something that we may or may not put into our game. But if we find a use for it, then we have it ready to go and we'll continue developing it. Something that you guys have seen before in our previous status updates is the work that we've been doing with rising fluids. So in this case, water, but in our game, it will be lava. So last month we had the water moving without the platforms, but now we actually have the platforms rising and falling with the water levels. And as we figured out in the months prior, buoyancy actually doesn't work on the platforms if we want them to rise and fall with the water levels. So because of this, and also just the complexity of water sim in terms of how it interacts with meshes within the game, we've decided to get rid of the water sim within our game entirely. We made this decision for a variety of reasons, including that we aren't using any of its functionality, primarily the buoyancy, in our gameplay, and it actually only works with landscape, and even at that, it doesn't work very well with landscape. It tends to be pretty finicky, and most of our levels are made entirely out of static meshes. So in those levels, we'll actually still need lava, so we would have to explore other avenues for lava in those levels anyway. And moving to meshes for our lava will actually make manipulating the visuals a little bit easier. But overall, this isn't a huge loss since buoyancy wasn't one of our flagship mechanics, and in terms of gameplay, we'll just continue to put emphasis on our rolling, dash, burst, and vine whip. Some other things for the general well-being of our game that we've been working on are jump buffering and ledge forgiveness. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have our jump buffering, which is exaggerated for example purposes. And it's kind of hard to see without someone actually pressing the keyboard and seeing that you have a little bit of leeway with the jump. But that's just to help make the flow of our game a little bit better and feel a bit more intuitive. And then same thing with ledge forgiveness. We have a little bit of coyote time right at the edge so that you have just enough time to fit in a jump or correct your movement when you're close to the edge. In terms of mechanics, we've also been working a lot on balancing. So here with our burst and dash, we've been working on collecting metrics and actually figuring out fine-tuning those values for the distances. In the upper video on the right-hand side, in the left-hand side of that video, you can see the dash where you go a little bit farther than you do with the burst. And then underneath that, you can actually combine the burst and the dash to go twice as far. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, we do have a video demoing some of the combinations that you can do with a dash and burst, which include reaching higher obstacles or even navigating around them. Also, along the lines of balancing, we've been working to balance our environmental challenges. So with the falling blocks in the bottom left-hand corner, we have different fall speeds. And here we can actually delay the start time of our falling objects so that they can alternate instead of all falling at the same time. And here we have a few different shapes for these falling objects, whereas before they were all limited to that one cone mesh. And here we have the different types that one will despawn when it hits the ground, one despawns when Peblito runs into it, and one that doesn't despawn and can be used as a platform. For the lava balls, we have adjusted it so that we can now customize, again, how many lava balls that we have, and we can adjust the path as well as the distance of the path and even the speed at which the lava balls travel. And for the jump pads, we can now angle these jump pads whichever way we want, and we can toggle off or toggle on whether or not they preserve lateral and vertical momentum. And this can be seen with the white platforms, which have it on, and the black ones, which have it off. So these provide different variations of the jump pad and can allow us to have Peblito travel different distances when he runs into the jump pad. As I mentioned previously, we've been very hard at work creating a bunch of action blocks, and we've actually created 43 humanoid action blocks. And something that we focused on when creating these action blocks was combining our different mechanics in a variety of ways so that we can get really cool gameplay and also have action blocks of varying difficulty. And the same thing goes for our rolling action blocks. We actually made 32 rolling action blocks, and these as well are incorporating different obstacles and platforms to try to see what is the most fun and most interactive gameplay that we can have here. So here I will actually take you into our gameplay demo, which will show some of the work that we've been putting into our action blocks a little bit more in depth. And then afterwards, I will take you on a fly around of our updates to the vertical slice island. So this first action block is the initial iteration, and I will take you through the gameplay, which it only has one path to follow and only one way to solve this action block. So now this is another iteration which incorporates varying ways to solve this action block. This first one is actually a simulation of a player who might be a little bit afraid to use all of the mechanics and tends to play it a little bit safe. For our next one, this character is a bit more confident and decides to use a few more mechanics in solving this action block. Up next, same thing, this is the initial iteration of our action block, and I'll take you through the one way to solve this action block. This one incorporates jumping and some dashes and can use vine swing or burst depending on how you would like to play through it in the new iteration. And again, this is the modified version of the action block. Again, we're starting off with a player who might want to play it a little bit more safe in their playthrough rather than combining all these mechanics in very interesting ways to achieve their goal. Here we have a player who's a little bit more confident and decides to use the vine whip to actually get to the final platform. And in this last one, we have a player who is very confident in their abilities and actually blazes their own trail in combining all of our mechanics and avoiding some of the platforms. So for our vertical slice island, we've actually done a lot to add the play path and set dress the area so that it's an interesting transition period from the cave tunnel sequence all the way up to the interior of the tree level. Here we can see some of the houses, some foliage, crystals, and the new entrance that we have added to our tree. Welcome back, everyone. So to keep things rolling, we've also been working on some sound for our mechanics. And this is a draft of the sound that we have for our burst mechanic. We would like to continue to develop not only this sound, but again, other sounds for our other mechanics. In terms of music, our artists have created another custom track, which is a bit more upbeat and suitable for faster placed gameplay like our rolling here. I think our team absolutely crushed it with this one, and I'm super pumped to see what they're coming up with next. But a big event that we had last month was our first focus group test. So some general stats for the averages for our vertical slice level are that it took an average of 3.67 attempts before someone would complete the level, an average of 6.89 seconds looking around the cavern admiring things, and there were an average of 0.89 positive movement related reactions and an average of 2.25 positive visuals related reactions per player. So in terms of the average rate of failure per challenge, these numbers represent the amount of times that players died while attempting this challenge. So players died 11% of the time on their first jump sequence, 29% of the time for the second jump sequence, 7% of the time for the cylinder area, 4% of the time for the stalagmite dash, 30% of the time for the jump onto the moving platform, 4% of the time for jumping off of the moving platform onto the stationary landing area. They died 11% of the time dashing across the lava gap, and then 4% of the time jumping across a lava gap. We also had them test 12 of our action blocks, and these numbers here are the average number of attempts per action block before the player either completed it or quit and moved on to the next action block. So 6 out of 9 of our playtesters ended up quitting an action block without completing it. And the biggest takeaway from all of this data is that we need to make our action blocks a little bit easier and provide some difficulty scaling. Action block number 7 took an average of 30.33 attempts, which is pretty high, and we don't want players to have to try our action blocks that many times to succeed, because then it'll just be too frustrating. So with this, we've set some goals for an easy action block. We would like to have that take 1 to 3 tries, and then for a medium difficulty action block, 4 to 6 tries, and then for a hard action block, 7 or more tries. In terms of QA and metrics, we've been continuing to develop our metrics gathering system. And in this first video, this shows that before we were able to view the gathered specific events in engine, but only as Peblito. Now we're able to fly about the engine freely, and we can still sort through these custom tracked events by event, player, date, and we've also implemented a way to filter it through by challenge. And we did this by creating collision boxes that our LDs can use to associate groups of jumps or actions to be a certain challenge, and then we can see specific stats for that challenge. In our next video, We also created, oop, sorry. Um, we also created a way to have our users register with unique usernames, and this way we'll be able to identify their data over time and filter by user. Currently, we just have had them use their Discord identifier since we are using Discord as our primary form of communication between us and our playtesters. In terms of some data that we've been gathering, this is the trend for our weekly meeting time. And we would like to have our meetings take a maximum of 3% of our total week time. So in the first week, we actually had a lot of meetings just because, start of capstone, got to get everyone on the same page. And then for the next 3 weeks, which including at week 3, we did have our first status update. We met our goal of keeping it at 13% or less. And then in weeks 5 and 6, we did have an increase in meeting time just because we were crunching to get prepared for vertical slice and be absolutely perfect. And then same thing in the 3 weeks following, we met our goal of keeping it below 13%. And then in this week, this was the week leading up to this status update, we've had a few more meetings than usual, which also included brainstorms for our 2 new levels. In terms of capacity usage, we would like to have our capacity right around 100%, not too far below it and not too far high it or not too far above it, because then that would mean we're either not utilizing all of our hours or we are overworking our people and then they might burn out soon. So the green line is our team excluding the leads, and the blue line is our whole team including the leads. So right around week 3, we had an increase or peak of hours right before our first status update. And then it kind of leveled out a little bit for our leads and then decreased for the rest of our team leading up to vertical slice, which took place at week 6. Our leads did end up crunching a lot right before vertical slice, but what's interesting is that the rest of our team didn't really crunch as much as our leads did. So that's good that our team isn't crunching, but it is something that we would like to monitor in the future to make sure that our leads aren't killing themselves with work. And then after that, our hours have actually leveled off right around the 100% mark, which is what we're going for and really good. So we'd hope to continue that moving forward. In terms of estimate accuracy, this shows the percent error of our estimates in percentages. So if something is 40% off, it could be 40% overestimated or 40% underestimated. But in the weeks leading all the way up until vertical slice, our estimates were really inconsistent in terms of accuracy. But right after vertical slice, they've sat right around the 40% error mark, which is nice in that we're being consistent. And the trend line is showing that our um, estimates are getting a bit more accurate. So I'm looking forward to continuing to make our estimates more accurate by monitoring this regularly. Another interesting point of data is that right about where it levels off coincides with where our capacity hours level off at around 100% as well. So as our estimates are getting more accurate and more consistent, our hours are getting more consistent as well. In terms of risk analysis, last month we talked about how vine width visuals, art pipeline dependencies, and texture spooling within our cave scene were all risks that we would like to keep an eye on. So for the vine width visuals, we are actually almost done with this. As mentioned in the video earlier, vine width visuals are almost completely done, and all we have to do now is get the actual animation of the vine attaching to the grapple point done, and then those will be completely done. In terms of art pipeline dependencies, we've been monitoring this and haven't overworked any one of our artists, which is really good, but this is something that we'll just have to continue to monitor throughout the rest of Capstone. And for texture spooling within the cave scene, we decided to address this problem by implementing texture scaling on our tree. And so we've researched a lot of technical solutions, and this one is one that's working best for us. So we just have to put the finishing touches on that, and then that risk will also be mitigated. So for this month, we would like to continue to monitor those previous risks just until they're done, or in case of art pipeline dependencies, continue to do that for the rest of Capstone. But the other top 3 risks that we identified were our leads crunching. As I mentioned previously, they crunched a lot right before vertical slice, and their work showed, but that's not something we want to get in the habit of doing. So making sure that we are communicating really well with progress and delays or any issues that we encounter, and that we're polishing as we're going, and that we're monitoring our leads hours to make sure we can kind of see any crunch coming and try to deal with it a little bit beforehand. So for destructible mesh interiors, this isn't something that we've encountered yet, but something that we need to keep an eye out for. We do use destructibles in our game, and something that is a possibility is the interior of the destructible mesh may not have the material that is on the outside. So in order to deal with this, we have talked with Team 2, and they came up with a really cool workaround. So we're going to test all of our destructible meshes as we put them in the game to see if they have this issue. And then if they do, we will use the workaround that Team 2 came up with to solve that problem. And our last risk is scripted events, which we're planning on including a couple within our game. And these are very complicated and have a lot of moving parts. Every team touches it, whether it's art, design, or programming. So there are a lot of dependencies, and we need to make sure that everything is going as planned. We plan to monitor this risk by making sure that all of our communication channels are clear and that we're keeping up to date with everything so that we're avoiding miscommunication or delays or doing work that really shouldn't need to be done. For our roadmap for the rest of Capstone, I've updated some of our milestones. So for April, we would like to create more special effects, complete the model of our enemy character. We'd also like to polish some mini mechanics, complete rolling and vine swing, complete 2.5 modules of our levels, make some more action blocks, and host another focus group test. Which, also, if you'd like to join our focus group test, reach out to me or any of the studio half leads and we can get you hooked up with our Discord server. For May, we would like to adjust the assets and polish, and then we would also like to finish animations for our new character. In terms of programming, they'll be working on bug squashing and polishing mechanics. And in design, we would like to complete 2 more modules and host another focus group test. For June, the art team will be polishing, programming will be bug squashing and polishing mechanics, and our design team will be polishing the levels and hosting another focus group test. And then in July, we'll be in alpha. So for a more tactical view of our April goals, our biggest focus for the month is getting our enemy character up and running as much as possible. So that includes modeling it and also implementing its functionality. For the art team, they're going to be focusing on creating this enemy, having it completely modeled, and have an idle animation by April 19th. And then they will also be working on creating new props, which include some temple assets, assets for the tree level, and props that will help build the atmosphere within both of these levels. And then our design team would also like to have another focus group test, and we have a bunch of new people who are going to come try out our game, but we also would like to recruit veteran testers, so if you have tested before and would like to test again, please reach out. We would like our design team to complete 2 modules and have one halfway done. We'd like to create more action blocks and implement the enemy character functionality. For programming, we'd like to complete all of our mechanics, get player death in our levels, and then have level transitions and level persistent functioning, as well as continuing to develop our metrics gathering system. So with this, we'd like to keep that momentum going in April and just move forward with all gas and no brakes. So that was our merch status update. Thank you guys so much.